the history and persecution of Yemenite Jews. I'm really excited to film the second episode in my series about the persecution of Jews in Arab countries. The first episode was about Moroccan Jewry, because it was the largest Jewish community in the Arab world. But today I'm focusing on the Jews of Yemen. Why? Well, to explain that, I need to tell you where I am. Right now, I'm in Sha'araim, a Yemenite neighborhood in the city of Rehovot. My grandmother lived most of her life in Rehovot, and she's buried here. My grandfather still lives here. I was born in Rehovot, and when I was younger, my grandmother would sometimes say, "Maybe you will marry a Yemenite girl. They are very beautiful." Well, that didn't happen. Is that a good enough reason to make this video? Maybe not, but let's get started. Today, we dive into one of the oldest, most fascinating, and most unique Jewish communities in the world, Yemenite Jewry. A community that survived thousands of years of isolation, oppression, and poverty, and still preserved its traditions and its Jewish pride. I'm filming at the Yemenite Jewish Heritage Center here in Rehovot. It is a house dedicated to a world that no longer exists. I will try to show you as much of it as I can, and I hope you will come visit someday. Yemenite Jews are among the oldest Jewish communities. According to their own tradition, Jews arrived in Yemen during the time of the First Temple, maybe even during the days of King Solomon. An ancient Sabaean inscription proves that there was a Jewish presence in the region we now call Yemen at least 2,500 years ago. But what were Jews doing in Yemen 2,500 or even 3,000 years ago? Here is something interesting and important. There are verses in the Bible that entire worldviews have been built upon. One or two verses that became whole religious movements. And then there are topics mentioned dozens of times in the Bible that we barely talked about anymore. One of those forgotten topics, incense. Incense is mentioned over 60 times in the Bible, not as a side detail, but as a central part of worship and divine service. It had a deep symbolic meaning, connecting to holiness, prayers, the presence of God, and the relationship between humans and the divine. The sweet-smelling smoke rising upwards symbolized prayers ascending to heaven. As it says in Psalms, "Let my prayer be counted as incense before you, and the lifting of my hands as the evening offering." Incense was also said to stop plagues. He stood between the dead and the living, and the plague was stopped. It was offered twice a day, in the morning and between the evenings. And where did incense come from? From trees and plants in the region of Yemen. The incense trade likely brought Jews to Yemen in the first place. After the destruction of the Second Jewish Temple in the year 70, Jews replaced incense and sacrifices with prayers. At the same time, the Roman Empire found cheaper alternatives and eventually converted to Christianity. As a result, Yemenite Jews were almost entirely cut off from the rest of the Jewish world. And yet, for hundreds of years, without contact with other Jewish communities, Yemenite Jews preserved ancient Hebrew, traditional halakha ruling, and unique customs. They were barely influenced by European or North African Judaism. Judaism is a religion of rules. There are thousands and thousands of them. And broadly speaking, the Jewish world can be divided into three traditions: Ashkenazi, Jews from Europe; Mizrahi, Jews from Muslim countries; and Yemenites. Another key feature of Yemenite Jewry, they were never part of mainstream Muslim society. In other Jewish communities, there were good times and bad times. Every second Moroccan Jew will tell you his uncle was the king's advisor. It sounds like Moroccan kings had thousands of Jewish advisors. That's what Jews did in Morocco, advised kings. But in Yemen, that wasn't the case. There were bad times and there were horrific times. And still, Yemenite Jews created a rich world of poetry, learning, and art. Under Muslim rule, Yemenite Jews were considered Ahl el-Kitab, people of the book. So they were granted a certain protection, but they were still dhimmis, second-class citizens. They paid special taxes, faced harsh social restriction, and weren't allowed to build new synagogues. In the 12th century, under the rule of King el-Mahdi, came one of the worst periods in Yemenite Jewish history: forced conversions, community destructions, and terror. That's when one of Judaism's greatest figures stepped in, Maimonides, Harambam. I talked about him in the video about Morocco. From Egypt, Maimonides wrote a long letter to the Jews of Yemen, Igeret Teiman, the letter to the Yemenites. Written in 1172, it responded to severe persecution and attempts to forcibly convert Jews to Islam. In the letter, he offered encouragement, praised their faith, harshly criticized Islam, and ruled that someone forced to convert was still Jewish in heart. He ended the letter with a promise that the Messiah would come and truth would prevail. The Igeret Teiman, the letter to the Yemenites, became a foundational document of spiritual leadership in a time of crisis. While most of the Jewish world evolved beyond Maimonides' Rambam teaching, Yemenite Jews held firmly to his path. But Maimonides wasn't Yemenite. The most iconic spiritual and cultural figure from Yemen was Shalom Shabbazi, a 17th century poet. He wrote in Hebrew, Arabic, and Judeo-Arabic. Yes, there was a language called Judeo-Arabic, and both Maimonides and Shabbazi used it. Shabbazi lived through expulsions and disasters, but his poetry was full of hope and faith. One of his most famous songs is Imni Nalu, performed by many, including the beloved Israeli singer Ofra Haza. In the 1980s, it became an international hit, but I will put a link below to the most beautiful version. During Shabbazi's lifetime, in 1679, came one of the worst disasters Jews in Yemen ever faced: the expulsion of Mausa. The Imam el-Mahdi Ahmed issued a brutal decree. Synagogues were to be destroyed, public prayer banned, and Jews expelled, because Yemen was too holy for the presence of Jews. At first, Jews had to choose between conversion or death. Eventually, the decree was changed to exile. Jews were deported to Mausa, a desert region in southern Yemen, where temperature can reach 50 degrees. During that year, 2/3 of Yemenite Jews died from starvation and diseases. It is one of the greatest Jewish disasters, and yet barely known. After a year, economic pressure forced the regime to let Jews return. But Muslims had taken over their homes and burned their holy books. The Jews were forced to live outside the cities. Another horrific policy began in the 18th century, the Orphan decree. Jewish or Christian children who lost their parents before adulthood were forcibly converted to Islam. Islamic theology teaches that all babies are born Muslim, and it is the parents who make them Jewish or Christian. So if the parents die, the child must return to Islam. That's why Jews in Yemen married off their children very young, to prevent forced conversions. For centuries, Yemenite Jews dreamt of Zion. Unlike other communities who saw the land of Israel as a myth or messianic idea, Yemenite Jews saw it as a goal. The first major Yemenite aliyah, immigration wave to Israel, was Ale Batamar group. They sold their belongings, abandoned villages, and risked their lives to reach the Holy Land. They arrived in 1882, a few months before the first wave of European Jews. So Yemenite Jews arrived before the white colonialists. Why did they all come to the land of Israel? Because Jews, no matter their skin color or language, pray facing Jerusalem and feel a deep historical, cultural, and religious bond with the land of Israel. That's even in our name, Jews from Judea, the mountains around Jerusalem. By 1948, 40% of Yemenite Jews had already immigrated to Israel. There is no other Jewish community where so many immigrated to Israel. Every day I get accused about 100 times that Israel is an European colonial state. And when that happens, I think of these images. In 1947, in the city of Aden, which was under British control, there was a pogrom. Muslims murdered 82 Jews, burned synagogues, schools, and dozens of Jewish-owned shops. After Israel was founded, Operation Al-Kanfei Nesharim, on wings of eagles, began. It is also called magic carpet, but I prefer the name on wings of eagles. It comes from a verse in the Bible. I bore you on eagle's wing and brought you to me. It's fitting not only because it is biblical, but also because the great eagle is one of Maimonides, Rambam's nicknames, and Yemenite Jews were deeply connected to him. During the operation, almost the entire Yemenite Jewish community, 50,000 people, was brought to Israel. And the airline that flew them, El Al, and, you won't believe this, Alaska Airlines. Yes, Alaska Airlines helped bring Yemenite Jews to Israel. One of the places they settled, here in Rehovot. Even though I was born here, I don't really know this neighborhood, Sha'araim. But my friend Daphna is a tour guide and she will come soon and show us around. Alan, Lomotek. So, Daphna, also a tour guide, not Yemenite, Moroccan. She belongs to the first video, but she will talk about the Yemenites. So, yalla, let's
do it. Welcome to Sha'araim, the first Yemenite neighborhood in Rehovot. Rehovot is considered the place where Yemenite Jews integrated most successfully, despite the many hardships. It was here that the first Yemenite neighborhood in the Moshavot was established in 1908, Sha'araim, followed later by the first Yemenite Moshav, Marmorek, built right next to it. So how did they get here? In 1908, a group of Jews from northern Yemen, from the villages of Haidan and Tzada, arrived in the port of Jaffa. They had heard about the first Jewish Moshavot, villages, in the land of Israel, and saw them as a sign from heaven that the days of the Messiah are near, and it is time for them to return to the Holy Land. At that time, Rehovot was a young moshava, less than 20 years old. It was founded in 1890 by Jews from Eastern Europe. Unlike other moshavot, Rehovot was completely independent from the start and did not rely on Baron Rothschild's financial support. Now, the farmers of Rehovot were in need of workers. They strongly believed in the ideal of Hebrew labor, avodah ivrit, both as a way of reconnect the Jewish people with the land after centuries of exile, during which Jews were often forbidden from owning land, and also as a means to reduce their dependence on Arab labor. At the same time, the Ashkenazi pioneers who came to work here were often less experienced in agriculture and also quite expensive. So when the people of Rehovot heard that the Yemenite Jews arrived in the port of Jaffa, they sent Yehuda Gorodeski to go and invite them to Rehovot. When they first arrived here, they had no proper homes, they live in tents, then comes the winter, and they were moved to barns and storage houses that belonged to the more established farmers of Rehovot. And then the situation touched the heart of a wealthy Jewish man named Ephraim Zaks, an Eastern European who made his fortune in Chicago. He helped them purchase land for a new neighborhood, Sha'araim, by offering them financial guarantees, and each family received about 1/4 of an acre land. The Yemenite community never forgot his kindness. They called him the father of the Yemenites, and to this day, there's a street in Sha'araim named after him, Ephraim Zaks. You can see here, we're standing next to one of the first 3 houses from 1910, made of mud. They built it from mud bricks. You can even see here inside, just like they did in Yemen. Later, they transitioned into using kurkar sandstone, just like all the other houses were built in those days along the shore and the area near the shore of Israel. So we're in a Yemenite restaurant in Rehovot, and we're having Yemenite meat soup. And this is a chilba, which I already ate. And you put the chilba in the soup. It's made of fenugreek seeds. The Yemenites say that their secret for long life, many of them live over 100 years old, is the chilba. It's fenugreek seeds that you soak in water and then you grind it with coriander, lemon, garlic sometimes. And for women, many women, when they're breastfeeding, they take pills with fenugreek because it makes sour milk for the baby. So you eat it, and here we have lachuch, which is a common Yemenite bread. It's kind of like a pancake, but it's salty. And you have here the saluf, which is another kind of bread. And you basically take a piece and you dip it in the soup and with the chilba. So good. We're in a Yemenite bakery called the Hari here in Rehovot, and we are here to eat jachnon. This is the jachnon, and it's a slow cooking dish that you cook all Shabbat and you eat on Shabbat morning. It's basically a rolled dough that you put in a pot and you eat it with a schug and a tomato sauce. And usually in Yemen, when they ate it, they made it with samna or samne. It's a clarified butter. Today, it got switched with margarine and oil. It's not as healthy as it was, but doesn't matter. Israelis from all backgrounds are crazy after this jachnon, and no matter if you're a Romanian or Russian or Ethiopian or Moroccan, you make jachnon almost every Shabbat. Behind me is Gadassi Spices Shop. We can find here the best Yemenite spices and non-Yemenite spices. It's always packed with people. One of the common Yemenite things you can buy here is the jale. Jale is a mixture of nuts and seeds roasted. And since the days that the Jews were in Yemen, the men used to sit every Shabbat morning in a circle on the ground, on pillows, and sing together Shabbat songs, longing for Zion, and in between, eat the jale. Today, many cafes and restaurants use it as an addition to the salad. It's great.
Okay, so a video about the Yemenite Jews cannot be a real good video without gut. You take it and you chew it for 3-4 hours. So we talked about the history of the Jews from Yemen, and we showed you the neighborhood and the food. But the Yemenite Jews are also very famous for their dance. And Daphne is a dancer, so maybe you can show us the Yemenite step.
Yes, of course. So it's a dance that you do always in circles. Whenever one of my Yemenite friends gets married and I start hearing that they put Yemenite music, I run to the dance floor and join them all, and it's becoming faster and faster and faster. And I love it.
Show us.
Yeah. So first we have the basic steps. It's while standing in the same spot, okay? Switching from side to side. And then we do it in circles, okay? So we have people joining me, and it looks like this.
Okay, so we came back to the Heritage Center after we walked a bit in Sha'araim. And one of the things which is very obvious is that you see a lot of synagogues, like every third house, fourth house is a synagogue. Why do the Yemenites have so many synagogues?
So in the Yemenite tradition, they send their kids from the age of 5 to study with the Mori. He's the teacher, and they sit with the Torah scroll around the table. The kids that sit on the other side from the Torah learn how to read it upside down, and they learn how to read and how to chant the right melodies and really go to the synagogue. You don't have to wait to be 13, but since you're 5, you learn how to do it. And then each family wants to go to the synagogue, hear their kids chant like as the cantors, and there's not enough room. So you open up another synagogue and another synagogue, and then you have one street with like 8 different synagogues so that everyone can read. Also, there are different communities that came from different places in Yemen, and they do it slightly different pronunciation, different chanting. And then this synagogue belongs to the people who came from Haidan, and this from those who came from Tzada, and then you have all of them.
Yeah, and this is maybe why they are also write and read without mistakes. Unlike other Jewish kids who make a lot of mistakes.
Spelling mistakes.
Spelling mistake, exactly. Yemenite Jews, they do it correctly, and this is why they don't have mistakes.
Yeah.
Spelling mistakes.
Yeah, they really testify that it's something that they hardly have or don't have at all. Another thing is that Yemenites have the het and the ein. They are probably pronouncing Hebrew in the right way. Something that is lost in today's Hebrew is the hummus and not hummus, and the la'alot and not la'alot. So the het and the ein are very clear there, and it's something that they still very proud of.
And if you speak Hebrew, you cannot miss it. Like when you speak with a Yemenite, then you hear it very, very clearly. If you want to tour with Daphna, her info is down below. She guides all over Israel, not just about Yemenite Jews. One thing I've learned about guiding, when I started guiding, I stressed about names and dates and religious details. But even if it is a group of archaeologists or Catholics, in the end, people want to hear about people. Tourists ask about Israeli society way more than about historical details. If you want a guide who will show you history and real Israeli life, food, music, dancing, Daphne is amazing. Sha'araim is just one Yemenite neighborhood in Rehovot. There is another one, Marmorek. We are now in Marmorek, and there is a memorial garden here. The basalat stones aren't from here. There are palm trees and a street nearby called Kinneret, the Hebrew name for the Sea of Galilee. There is a hidden story here about the founding of Marmorek, now a neighborhood in Rehovot. A group of Yemenite Jews arrived between 1909 and 1912. Zionist institutions promised them land and work in the southern Galilee. But there was another group there, Eastern European Jews with a very different ideology. Yemenite Jews came out of faith and tradition. The European Jews wanted to create a new Jew, socialist, modern, and secular. The Yemenites were pushed out, forced to live near the water pump station, and faced huge hardships. The socialist pioneer wanted them gone and pushed them out. In 1929, the Yemenite Jews were forced to leave the Galilee and came here. This became the first Yemenite settlement in Israel, and in the 1950s it became part of Rehovot. The story of Kinneret remained an open wound, not just for the 10 families who moved to Marmorek, and not just for Yemenite Jews, but for the relationship between European Jews and Jews from Arab countries. After the big aliyah in the 1950s, only a few Jewish families remained in Yemen. When the war in Yemen broke out, the last families fled or were expelled. Today, there are probably only 4 Jews left in Yemen. 3 elderly people and Levi Merhavi, who has been imprisoned by the Houthis since 2016. When we talk about hostages, I think he deserved to be mentioned too. And we should do whatever we can to save him and bring him home to Israel. I hope you enjoyed the video. I don't know how it will turn out in editing, but it was really important for me to make. The next video will be about Iraqi Jews. Links to Ofra Chazer's song, the Yemenite Center, and Daphna's infos are below. See you in the next video. Yalla bye.